Hey, what's up, y'all? Welcome to Lancast. It's been a few weeks since our last episode, but today I have an awesome guest with us, my own brother, Rob, from Texas, streaming right now. What's happening? Yeah, we're gonna have a good old time tonight. Doesn't Rob look like Joe Rogan a little bit? Or is just yeah, because Rob has a bit of jujitsu background, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess Joe Rogan is technically my Texas neighbor here. So
Oh, that's right. Yeah, he's
he's just up the road in Austin. Yeah.
Yeah, Austin.
Oh, you live in Austin?
No. I live in San Antonio, but Austin is right up the highway from.
Yeah,
only like an hour,
yeah.
right? Something like that.
Yeah, about an hour 15, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I've only been the one time, but I'm gonna go back now because all my favorite podcasters get together there. Like, and Dave Smith. I don't know if he's out there, but he goes out there all the time.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think he either has an apartment or a home there. I'm not sure because I think he bounces back and forth from Texas to New Jersey.
Yeah. Well, wasn't that comedy thing based out of there? The I can't remember what it's called.
Comedy
now.
Mothership.
Yeah.
I've heard that, Austin is becoming some sort of new mecca for comedy.
Oh yeah, it's bigger than LA.
Really?
Oh yeah, every big time comic is pretty much in Austin now because of COVID.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like the comedy store in LA pretty much just got destroyed when COVID happened. So like Tony Hinchcliffe, John Ross, Joe Rogan, Bert Kreischer, those guys all moved to Austin, Texas. And I think there's 6 or 7 comedy places on 6th Street alone.
Okay. I don't go out to Austin enough, quite honestly, to tell you, but
Right.
we usually only go up there for concerts and things like that. Last time I was up there was for Weezer.
Nice.
Yeah.
Good stuff. That's before Josh's time.
Is it?
Weezer is. I wheeze a lot. I don't know what Weezer is.
Josh are you still in your 20s? You're young.
I will be 30 in July.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
That is before your time.
It's terrifying. I don't know what it feels like to be over out of your 20s. Like it just feels I'm not ready for it.
It's even better. I liked my 30s. Well, it's all good. I'm all along for the ride. I'm enjoying all of it.
Yeah.
You get better like with wine aging. It gets better every year. You accumulate more wisdom or more nonsense. I don't know. Any how you look at it.
Yeah. For me in my late 40s, it's mostly I'm doing things now that I wish I had done when I was younger.
Right.
Like jujitsu.
Yeah, that's cool.
Oh yeah, your recovery time is much worse.
Yeah.
That's true.
That's right.
Oh,
wait,
man.
have you went professional or not professional, but have you done competitions and
I've
tournaments?
just done one competition. Yeah.
How'd it go?
It didn't go so great. I only had 2 matches. The first one was against a guy who had competed quite a bit.
Oh man.
And I just wasn't prepared for it. He got me in a particular position called north-south that I had not practiced getting out of. And he just went back and forth between that and side control. And I was basically pinned the whole time.
Oh yeah. So even if you did you submit or was it points?
It was just points. He just racked up points.
Oh,
well. By the second match, I was just exhausted. So yeah. And I had very little stand-up game because we don't do a whole lot of stand-up practice, so I didn't really know what to do at the beginning of the match.
Mm-hmm.
But I have 0 regrets about doing it. It was such a huge learning experience for me. And my coach told me that when after doing competition, when you go back and you do your rolls with the guys at the gym, everything is going to be in slow motion because the intensity level is so high in competition. That when you go back to normal sort of sparring or rolling, it just seems slowed down, and that has been the case. That has been my biggest challenge in my jiu-jitsu journey is just learning to calm down and just chill out and not just be hyped up like the white belt syndrome.
That's cool. You got to start somewhere.
Yeah, I don't know when I'm gonna like actually compete because I just started, but I imagine I'm probably gonna wait at least a year.
Yeah, I
Like,
think that's a good idea.
I don't see the point in like going in and getting my butt kicked. Like I might
Yeah.
as well like learn some moves, learn some fundamentals before I even stick my neck out.
Yeah, I know some people they advocate like just jumping into competition like at 6 months or something like that. Maybe if you're going like 4 or 5 times a week,
Yeah,
but
not doing that.
for someone like me who goes like, usually like 3 times a week or something like that. Yeah, my coach is sort of reserved about it. Like he doesn't want people competing until like they really know like all their fundamentals really well and have rolled a lot and gotten some good experience.
Yeah. Do you have kids? I guess I should. Okay,
Yeah,
so
no 4 kids, yeah, and the youngest 2 do jujitsu with me.
oh, that's what I was gonna ask. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like my son's been doing it for a year now, and have you noticed like the patience of your kids that do jujitsu like evolved and got better once they started jujitsu?
I have not noticed that yet. I mean, my kids are both 10 years old.
Okay.
The ones who are taking it. Maybe they will at some point. Like my son, who's almost 11, for him it's just like a discipline thing, like just to get him to go and take it seriously and stuff. My daughter's actually really good, and the coach considers her one of like the best in the class. Like out of all of them, like he kind of thinks that she's the one who would probably be most likely to compete.
Okay.
Just because she's a little girl, good listener, like, doesn't complain. She's, she aims to please. So like,
Probably
but she also has like a good body type for it as well, So yeah.
That's cool.
Sorry, I interrupted you. Yeah.
No, you're good. You're good. No, the reason why I started doing jiu-jitsu, well, my son made me do it, but like the reason why I wanted my son to do it was because like from Rogan and from some other people online, they're just saying like if you have sons, it is like literally the best and the best form of combat to teach your sons at an early age.
I would agree with that.
Cool. Yeah, so like it teaches them discipline. It teaches them, like if you don't listen to your coach, you're gonna get messed up. You're not just gonna get messed up. You're gonna get messed up in front of a whole bunch of other boys your age. So like you need to pay attention.
Honestly, I mean, it goes across all ages. I think it applies for us as men. The reason I got into it was probably the most influential reason was listening to Jocko Willink. I don't know if you know who that is, but yeah, like the Jocko podcast and stuff. I listened to his book. I got the audio version of Extreme Ownership. I've listened to that a couple times, and then listened to his podcast a lot. And he talks about like how, it helps with humility. You learn about yourself. Like everyone is going to get tapped out like a million times. There's just no way around it. Like with jiu-jitsu, and so like you can't go into it thinking like I'm just a born badass, I'm gonna beat everyone. No, I get regularly destroyed by like a 13-year-old. I've got like 60 pounds on him, but he's been doing it for like 7 years.
Wow.
And he just destroys me. I mean, I will never be able to submit him probably.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, in a 5-minute round, he'll probably like submit me 3 times or something.
Wow.
Yeah.
The cool thing, this is Lancaster, so like we mainly talk about Lancaster stuff, but I didn't even know that Lancaster was like a really big jiu-jitsu place, Danny. Did you know that?
No, I didn't know until you just
said either.
Yeah, so Lancaster has Gracie 717, which there's a couple of MMA guys that train there, and there's also like a whole bunch of like people who are aspiring to get to MMA in one day. Like it's a very serious gym, like even more serious than like the gyms in Harrisburg.
No kidding.
Yeah. So like,
I heard the same about Austin being a big.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah,
but I didn't know
Ryan's out of there. He's like one of the big names now.
Yeah, What? I don't know about how big. Are you talking? What's the name again? What was the name?
Gordon Ryan.
I didn't think he was from Austin.
I don't think he's from there, but I think he lives there now. I think,
okay. That wouldn't surprise me. That wouldn't surprise me. But yeah, Lancaster County. I didn't realize this at all. It's like really strong for jiu-jitsu, and I didn't know that. Because like my son went to one in E-Town, and the E-Town one affiliated with a whole bunch of Harrisburg ones. But apparently Gracie 717 is a really, really well-known one in Lancaster and like all around the state. And then my coach, me and my son's coach, he opened one himself in Halifax, which is only 23 minutes from me. So there's a Gracie 717 in Lancaster, and then there's a Gracie 717 North, which is in Halifax, the one I go to.
Okay.
But do you know why it's called Gracie? You know, like the background story?
No.
So like, so okay. So this is like through the grapevine, how it's been told to me. So Gracie was the last name of a family in Brazil who took in a Japanese man who didn't want to fight in World War II. Oh. He fled Japan and went to Brazil.
Okay.
And Brazil has always been known for their wrestling, right? So he taught this family that took him in jiu-jitsu, which is why it's called BJJ, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now that's the story that I've been told 3 times from 3 different people. I think it's true. I also haven't read up a ton on it, but like that's why the name is Gracie.
Yeah, the Gracies are I mean, they're the founders of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Okay.
Gosh, I forget the grandfather's name.
This is good for I'm totally ignorant about any of this stuff. Like
I'm ignorant. This is just the grapevine that I've been told. Like
they're the ones who promoted Jiu-Jitsu, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in the United States. They're the ones who started like the first Ultimate Fighting Championship. Really, like I think it was a Gracie and then some promoter got together, and really their thinking was that this was the way to promote Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and show the world that this is like the superior martial art. And so I think it was Royce Gracie was the first one to win like multiple, the first few UFCs. And then it just became like sort of a dynasty. And my coach learned from, I don't know, one of the first Gracies in California. He I think brought Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He was the first Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and my coach was the first Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu instructor at American Kickboxing Academy in California, which is like a big like MMA gym. A lot of like now like championship fighters fight out of. And also my coach was in the first season of the Ultimate Fighter reality show. So yeah, but anyway, that's like the genesis of like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and like the Gracies, like, and they were a big part of Pride Fighting Championship. Which was
Pride. I was gonna mention.
Yeah, they were in that in Japan, which was sort of going on at the same time as like the early UFC fights. So yeah, they were all over the place and super influential, and yeah, their names are all over Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu gyms. It's sort of gives the place like clout and recognition if it's associated with the Gracies.
Oh, that's informative. That's cool. I mean, I know less about martial arts than most people, although all 3 of us Martin brothers took Taekwondo.
Yeah, that's true.
I wanted to ask you, how does looking back, how does it compare to your Taekwondo experience? Like if you pictured yourself the same age doing Taekwondo versus what you're doing now.
Yeah.
It sounds more intense.
It's way more intense. Yeah. I think what is valuable about it is that, so like with Taekwondo, you can do sparring and stuff, right? But
yeah,
there's going to be a cap to the level of intensity because you're going to like hurt each other with like, getting struck in the face or something like that. You'll bleed or things like that. You can't really like go that hard because of those sort of striking limitations and with safety. But like with jujitsu, like you can go pretty hard and physically exert yourself a lot harder, I think. But also get close to a position where you would actually win a fight, like in a street fight or something, like a choke or a joint lock or something like that. You're going to be able to practice things that will actually end a fight, like in real life.
Yeah, I didn't realize that police academies use jiu-jitsu, or like
not enough.
Apparently not
enough. It's not enough. Like, and in fact, like for what I found is that a lot of jiu-jitsu places will offer like police discounts and stuff, but I've heard from instructors that a lot of the times they just don't want to do it. They'll be offered the chance to do it, but they'd rather not. And I don't know why that is, but so a lot of the times it is like an extracurricular thing for police to train on. It's not necessarily something that is always offered by their academies. So
yeah, because the one in Lancaster, the Gracie and Lancaster, my coach said that there a lot of police are there that they remember when they go there.
That's good.
Yeah, it's really good.
Which makes me like know that I'm not gonna break the law in Lancaster City.
Yeah, but honestly, like it's safer for the public too. Like, and it's safer for criminals, I think, because if you have an inexperienced cop who's trying to do like a chokehold or something like that, like he doesn't know like the proper way to do those things or the proper way to like bring someone under control, like then they might actually really hurt them.
Perhaps George Floyd wouldn't have happened if
honestly, like that could be avoided, I think.
Wow.
Because what was it, Chauvin? What was his name? Chauvin? Yeah. Because I'm pretty sure that wasn't a jiu-jitsu move that he was doing. That was a jiu-jitsu.
Cool. Now I have something to talk about with Sheriff Lepler next time I see him.
Yeah, make sure he's getting his guys trained.
Yeah, that's cool.
But it's on a similar vein. If you're going to talk to him, I think it's also important that police have proper firearms training.
Sure.
But a lot of them I found out like really don't. So I'm a member of like this members only like shooting range where like there's some trainers there who are like former, like I think he's like the main guy like works for like Blackwater and stuff like that. They really know like firearms training and stuff like that. Can you hear my dogs?
I can totally hear that.
Okay, sorry.
They're getting at it. I was like, what are those dogs doing over there?
Sorry, they're just playing over here. But yeah, like he has regularly, like he's got a team that does training. They've gone up against like SWAT teams and like police forces, like on like force on force simulated trainings, and they just mop the floor with them all the time. And it just tells you that, and they'll be the first to tell you this, is that like most police forces have like suboptimal like firearms training. They have to qualify like once a year, and it's like really like not very challenging, shooting. Usually it's like static, like flat range shooting, you're not moving or anything like that. So that's another area of like, police training that probably should be improved.
Let me just speak on the libertarian stand front.
Yeah.
I'm happy police don't know how to be tyrannical. I like that. Let's go. That makes me happy.
Wait, what's that?
I'm kind of okay with police not knowing how to use firearms, and it's great. Like,
but honestly,
I'm not going to break the law or anything. I'm not going to break the law or anything. But it's just the less the police can like really like be tyrannical, like in the case they ever would. Yeah, I'm okay with that. You know what I mean?
No, I'm the same way, but the more I've like understood about it, and like
you don't want Uvalde either. You don't want Uvalde.
Yeah. True.
I mean, like there's definitely like a happy medium. You don't want like 300 cops just standing around and arresting frantically terrified parents who are just trying to get their kids out of a mass shooting. and they arrest the parent instead of going in there and taking out the guy. But still, like I think Lancaster. I remember when Lancaster's police got like it's not a tank, but it's like a heavily armored like it looks like a tank. But
I know, what you're talking about.
And I'm just like, this is Lancaster City. Why do you need that? Like,
but honestly, I think like the firearms training aspect is more for the public safety, because I mean there are a lot of incidents I think where they don't hit what they're shooting at, and that's of course that's just as dangerous.
Yeah, to me it logically follows like the more expertise you have, the less likely you'll be to be tyrannical, as you said, Josh.
Yeah, I think so. I think like maybe they'll have more respect for it and respect their own ability.
Right. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, yeah, we could talk about guns or I don't know. Are we done with the martial arts? Like, hey, Josh, I wanted to ask you: have you ever heard of May Oyama?
May Oyama?
He was the founder of Kyokushin Karate. He was world famous. He's long deceased, but I was just wondering if they ever...
No. So I didn't really get into martial arts until about a year and a half ago.
Okay.
Like UFC. Okay, hold on. I can enjoy a good Conor McGregor fight, just like every other like red-blooded American male. Okay. Right. I would definitely love to watch. I love watching Conor McGregor and Strickland and those guys. But other than that, no, I didn't know much about martial arts.
I was just curious. Rob and I are related to him. That's
of course you guys are.
Hundreds. When I told my friend who's from Thailand, I told him in 10th grade, May Oyama's my uncle. He did not believe me. He was like, "There's no way." That's how famous the guy was, I guess, in Thailand.
Wow.
So, and yeah, if I see him today, he probably still would tell me the same thing. He's not your uncle. That was his catchphrase. He's not your uncle.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. You should look him up. Yeah, pretty famous.
No, I'll look him up for sure.
Yeah, you can find there's a 45-minute documentary you can see on YouTube. It was probably done in the 90s or something like that. That you could watch about him and his students.
What religion was he? Well, what religion did he follow?
I think he was just Japanese Shinto religion.
Yeah, so he defected. Well, I don't know if defect is the right word.
Yeah, he's not defected, yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. It was when Korea was under Japanese occupation. He basically, I think they call him Zenichi Japanese, these Koreans who became Japanese culturally, basically. And he moved to Japan. He wanted to be a kamikaze pilot during World War II. I think he actually worked on airplanes, but he would see all his friends go off and not come back.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
I love the Japan, what we did to Japan after World War II is kind of a tragedy in my opinion.
Yeah.
Not only did we bomb 2 cities that were full of civilians, but we took away their culture. It's real. They had a really cool culture, that was thousands of years old, and an amazing honor culture too. An honor culture unlike anything in the West. The closest thing to their honor culture would have been the Vikings, maybe, or the Knights Templar. So I don't know. It's just, if you think about their honor society pre World War II and what it is now, it's just sad. It's just
yeah. Well, that was one of the interesting things about May Oyama, in the post World War II period. He really adopted the Bushido warriors code. He really loved that about Japanese culture. And in his of course that was incorporated into his study of karate. But he would go around picking fights with American MPs and get into fights with them.
Wow.
And you can even there was movies made about him where they that's part of the the movie. Wow. But yeah, then he he wanted to, I don't know, take karate to the next level. So he got some sort of sponsorship, like somebody like I think paid for him to basically so he could go and become a monk basically for like 3 years on top of this mountain in isolation, like as a hermit, and read like the Book of Five Rings and, you know, just train his body and stuff. And essentially he did that for like, I think it split it up into 2 like 1.5 year periods. But when he was done with that, he basically challenged the entire Japanese martial arts establishment, like basically fight me, like you can't beat me. And
did he win?
You know, he gained, you know, students that way, and eventually made a name for himself and earned himself the nickname the God Hand.
That's cool.
Yeah, pretty wild.
So if he was a monk and he was on top of a mountain for 3 years,
I should say hermit, not a monk.
Well, okay, so he wasn't like a legitimate monk. Like
no, he wasn't. No, it was not part of like any sort of like religious or spiritual like
okay,
like that. Yeah.
Okay.
Bad choice of words on my part.
Okay, because I was wondering, it's super interesting how like we're all like all 3 of us are Christians, but it's super interesting how the monks in Asia, how they can dedicate their, you know, entire lives or a certain period of time of their lives like to silence or to just hours and hours of meditation and stuff like that, and they can do all these like amazing things. But like we're Christians, so we believe like, you know, like we believe in the one true God. But like the accomplishments of monks, I don't know how they do it. Like
Rob and I did a week-long silent retreat once. I mean, you probably did more, Rob, but that was amazing to me. Like even just the 1 week, like, wow, what an experience. Like you can't talk to anyone. Yeah. We got a small taste of that.
I would never survive, Danny. I would not.
I'll kill you, Josh.
I would not survive.
It's great. So yeah, there's a monastery in Oklahoma that I actually try to visit maybe like once every few years. I have a few friends who are monks there. But it's a very like medieval, like traditional Benedictine monastery. Like the monks don't really talk much, except during times when they have permission. The rest of the time is just, you know, Gregorian chant and prayer and silent prayer and studies and manual labor. But I like to go there, you know, just to sort of, you know, reconnect with God, reconnect with nature, because you're usually like out of cell phone range there. You know, it's awesome. But I get what you're saying, Josh. I think that's a good point. And I think it's a challenge for us as Christians when we're faced with, you know, people who don't have the advantage of grace, yet they're doing like extraordinary things as far as, you know, self-discipline, you know, renunciation of the world, and the values of the world. It sort of puts us to shame. I think it's sort of you know, something that we should, you know,
multiple world religions put Americans to shame. American Christians to shame, especially American Christians. It's pathetic. It's pathetic. Western Christians are just the laziest, lowest of low Christians in the world. And I'm not even like self-hating. Like everyone knows it. Like every Christian who, even if you go to church on Sunday, in America, I mean, you have to like realize that, like, I mean, people are going harder than I am, and I have no excuse. People in Africa are getting their hands chopped off.
Oh yeah.
People in the Middle East are being killed and crucified and strung up. Like, yeah. I mean, we can take a lesson from literally every single other religion in the world and like be like, you could be more hardcore or whatever.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned Africa. I have a couple of friends who were either priests or seminarians in Nigeria, and they used to tell me that a lot of their congregations would basically walk a day to get to mass on Sunday. So when you have mass, they would expect the priest to like preach for like an hour, which is rare for a Catholic mass. And then like after mass, they would have like a benediction and then more preaching like for another hour. So like it was like an all day thing.
Yeah.
When they would preach, though, would they preach in their native language, or would they preach in Latin?
No. It was English.
Okay, so then, well, let's just get into it. So like when the chants happen, though, is that in their native language, or did those converted Catholics would do the Latin chants and repeat?
So at this particular church, it was in Latin because these were priests who celebrated the Latin Mass, like the older form of the Mass. But you know, from what I've heard from them and from other missionaries who worked in Africa, like even in the 20th century, like the people like did not have a problem like learning the Latin parts of the Mass. I mean, they're always the same every Mass. So once you know the meaning, you know the meaning. Like it's not going to go away. And then like the chants, like that's just a matter of memorization. And honestly, like music is usually an easier thing to memorize, right? When words are easier to memorize when set to music, especially. So like it's never really been like a cultural barrier, like from what I've heard from missionaries, at least to Africa.
Okay, so in Africa, there's obviously a lot of missionaries, but I would tend to think that most of the missionaries were Protestant.
Well, I don't know about nowadays, like whether it's considered missionary territory, because like I mean, the Catholic Church is growing, I think, faster in Africa than any other continent.
Okay.
And in fact, I think they're producing more like priestly vocations than any other continent. I might be wrong about that, but I mean, if I look around my own diocese, like there's quite a few African priests here, from various African countries, like Uganda, Nigeria, Rwanda, I think are all represented. But I don't know about like Protestant activity in Africa. Yeah.
See, I know I've funded, and I've also like read, and I've also supported several like Protestant. By the way, Protestant is a word I don't use very often, but because I'm talking to two Catholics,
we're making the distinction. Yeah, that's fine.
So like the Protestants that I know of in Africa, like, is there how do I say this? Is there like a turf war in Africa for the souls of Africans?
Oh, I'm sure there's some degree of competition there. But honestly,
because I'm just curious. Because like I can almost like imagine like stupid, but I can almost imagine there being like a missionary for a Protestant missionary, and then like seeing like a ceremonial like Catholic missionary coming, like, oh geez, here we go. Like,
honestly, I doubt that's much of an issue, like at least in Nigeria, because they have to worry about, like in certain parts of the country, like Boko Haram and other sort of extremist like Muslim groups, like they will come and kidnap priests or kill villagers and things like that. So that's probably their bigger concern.
Man. That's crazy.
Hey, but I wanted to go back to something you had mentioned about, like, us Christians in the West being sort of weak. This sort of came up, this is a thing, I think, within the Catholic world as well. Just within the Catholic world. A friend of mine is a Melkite Catholic. So that's not Roman Catholic. Melkites are part of an Eastern Rite church that is based out of like Lebanon, Syria. I think the original patriarchal church is in Antioch.
So would this be like would this be like the Christians that like
it's like Orthodox Christians,
right? But like I'm just trying to like nail it down. Are these like the Christians that like were in charge of the Nativity Church? Like
I think
like
I think there is I think there's a Melkite.
I shouldn't say Palestine, but what you know what I mean. Whatever.
I'm fine with that.
Okay.
But yeah, like there's Melkites, there's Maronites. Maronites are in Lebanon mostly, I think. But these are sort of Eastern rites of the Catholic Church. They don't celebrate the same liturgy that we do, but they're in communion with the Church of Rome.
They're the OG.
I don't know. So that's debatable because from what I've heard, a lot of the Eastern rites acknowledge that like the Roman Rite liturgy is the oldest, or has the longest continuous history. I mean, a lot of the Eastern liturgies are very old as well, and they have a huge respect for tradition. But as far as like maybe the first converts to Christianity, yeah, I mean, like a lot of the Palestinian and Lebanese and Syrian Christians are probably descendants of those Jews who first followed Christ.
Right. That's what I was kind of getting at.
Yeah.
That's what I was wondering. So like, would they also be with the with the Ethiopian Christians too?
Well, that's a separate Eastern rite, like I forget what rite it would be called. I know there's like an Eritrean rite, and maybe there's an Ethiopian Orthodox Church, I think.
Okay.
So in fact, I just saw a video today of the Ethiopian Rite Catholics celebrating Mass today at St. Peter's. I guess they're having some sort of celebration or get together there in Rome currently. But yeah, like these Melkites, they're one of these Eastern churches. We just had like the first same date for Easter with the Orthodox in like 500 years or something like that. Like they have a different calendar for that.
Yeah, I knew they had a different calendar.
Yeah.
Can I say something? I have a question about that. Okay, so this is what I wanted to get into. I want to ask.
Yeah.
So what I was taught from my father, who was a Roman Catholic in Philly, like his father paid for a pew in the Philly Orthodox Roman Church and like all that craziness. I think that's crazy. Anyways,
that's a little weird. I've never heard of that.
He paid for a pew. It was a yearly fee. He paid for a pew, and their name was on it, and all that. Yeah, very hardcore.
Creative fundraising, I guess.
It was very hardcore, very very hardcore church. Anyways, is it from what my father and my grandfather like told me was that like the way that the Roman Empire incorporated Christianity with the pagan worshippers is that they incorporated Christmas with the winter solstice and then Easter with the spring solstice, and like that's how they had these two cultures mesh harmoniously. Is that why they're celebrating Easter on a different day?
No, honestly, I mean the celebration of Easter, the date changes because we're still following the lunar calendar that the Jews follow, for the Passover. So I think the difference comes from maybe they use like the Julian calendar.
That sounds Jewish, by the way.
Versus the Gregorian calendar. I think that might be why there's a discrepancy. The Julian versus the Gregorian calendar.
Okay. So it doesn't have to do with.
I don't think it has to do with adoption of like pagan holidays or anything like that.
Okay. Yeah.
But going back to my point about the Melkites, and really this applies to all the Eastern churches. They make fun of us Roman Catholics because their fasting during Lent is really hardcore.
Right.
In fact, I think they start earlier than we do. They're essentially vegan for the duration of Lent. And then there's more, I think, days of actual like not eating fasting. So, that's just the example I wanted to give of like within the Catholic world, there is that sort of like you Westerners are soft, Yeah.
Well, that makes sense though. I mean, if you're surrounded by Muslims and they do Ramadan, wouldn't that make sense that like their version of the Catholic version of Ramadan, even though it's not really you know what I mean? It kind of makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Like, but I mean, the Western Church used to be much more strict about, Lenten fasting. Like in the time of Charlemagne, I think, they didn't break fast until like 3 o'clock in the afternoon or Vespers or something like that. And that would be like your Lenten fast. Like you fast most of the day. It's basically like intermittent fasting.
Right. So what's the difference between the Catholic Church that you were just talking about, the Melkite?
Melkite.
Okay.
Yeah, Melkite.
So what's the difference between them and then like the Russian Orthodox and then the Roman Orthodox? What's the difference?
There's we don't really refer to it as Roman Orthodox, it's Roman Catholic Church, but then the Russian Orthodox or the Greek Orthodox Church, they essentially believe the same things. There are a few minor differences, but we recognize them as having a valid priesthood, valid sacraments. They celebrate the same sacraments. They believe the same things about, the Trinity and Mary and the saints. But they don't, and they have bishops and priests and religious, brothers and sisters. But they don't submit to the authority of the Roman Pontiff as the head of the church.
So they don't submit to the Pope.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. Josh had some questions about the Pope selection process.
Yeah.
That's baloney, bro. That's baloney. Here,
It's okay. Hey, speak your mind, brother. Well, you described it as being.
Imagine if every Protestant church or Protestant convention of churches voted for their leader, voting for the head of a church makes zero sense to me if you believe in the Holy Spirit and if you believe in the praying and seeking God for him to tell you what to do. That doesn't vote. A popularity contest doesn't make sense. I don't get it.
Well, so the Cardinals, so I guess it comes from sort of a communal practice of the clergy in a certain area.
Mm-hmm.
I think they would select the next bishop that way, or at least certain seniors of the clerics would do that. And I think it came out of that. So the cardinals are supposed to be the clergy of Rome. That's originally what they were. And so they would select the next bishop. The selection of bishops and popes is sort of an interesting thing, historically. I mean, there's times in history where the people sort of acclaimed, we want so-and-so to be the bishop. I think that's how St. Augustine became a bishop, just by popular acclamation. But then it became a more sort of, structured process. But yeah, now it's a matter of, it's a democratic process.
Yeah, it's weird. It's weird.
I get that. I mean, it's supposed to be a prayerful democratic process. I mean, I don't know if it's better that way or to have one pope name his successor.
Yeah, what's the alternative? Right. Is there a better system?
Yes, there's a much better system. It's called Protestant. I'm sorry.
Damn, fighting
is there a better system to get humans out of leadership? Yes, just everyone follow what God is telling them to do individually. Yes, that is decentralized religion right there.
Well, then that introduces the issue of people coming up with different interpretations of the Word of God, and
as long as you don't kill each other over it, it's okay. It's between you and God.
Well,
and to be fair, it's the Catholics that have killed the most people. I mean, y'all, the Crusades and all that. I mean,
I would debate that.
Hitler was a Catholic.
Well, he did not kill in the name of the Catholic Church, and besides, the Soviets killed more. Right? I mean, I think they
were communists. There was no Roman Orthodox Church at the time. They killed all the.
Well, Catholics. Yeah, but they killed in the name of atheism.
Yes, yeah, any atheism.
And they killed a lot more.
But look, what I think what I was trying to say about voting for a pope.
Yeah.
It's just that I grew up Pentecostal, so I'm crazy to you probably. Like no, like if you were in my church service, you'd have like a order in the court, you know. So like to me, my God is a God of like is the same God that David was dancing before.
Sure.
He's the same God that parted the Red Sea. He's the same God that did all these miraculous things. And Mass doesn't seem miraculous. It doesn't seem like the kind of like miraculous worship that God was pleased over when David was dancing as the Ark of the Covenant was being brought back to Jerusalem. Like,
well, I'm sure you're familiar with the book of Leviticus, right?
Well, yeah.
So take a look at that sometime again, maybe with a different lens, and look at how prescriptive the book of Leviticus is as far as how God is to be worshipped. God told the Israelites how he wanted the sacrifices to be performed. He describes, the way the temple should look, the sort of decorations it should have. Same thing with the Ark of the Covenant, like how it should be decorated, what it should be, how it should be, what kind of wood to use, and like how it should be gilded with gold, and all these sorts of.
But that was before the veil was ripped. That was before Jesus died on the cross, and the veil was ripped, and then there was no barrier between God and his people.
Okay, God told them how to worship him. All right, and yes, the veil was ripped, but our understanding is, as Catholics, is that when Jesus celebrated the Last Supper, he was giving them the form of the new of the sacrifice of the new covenant. That this is how his sacrifice would be perpetually offered. The same sacrifice, but because it's a divine sacrifice of God, it can be offered forever. It's essentially a timeless sacrifice. Really, like, so the Old Testament temple worship should be for us like a prefigurement of that. So we should deal with it with the same level of gravity and ritual and respect that they would have as well. And so we have inherited a tradition, a liturgical tradition that is very prescriptive. And the Eastern Orthodox, even though they've been separated for us for 1,000 years, they have the same attitude towards it, that we have to carry on what we've received by tradition, what we would consider like a divine tradition, handed from the apostles of how to worship God. Of course, there has been sort of, elements that have been added over the years, but no essential changes to the central part of it, which is the consecration of bread and wine to what we believe is the body, blood, soul, divinity of Jesus, and offered in perpetuity. And so we have access to the perpetual graces offered by the sacrifice of the cross, which includes the forgiveness of sins, the invitation to eternal life, all those things that you would acknowledge that Christ achieved on the cross and through his resurrection.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. It's just like, does that mean that, look, I've taken communion. I just don't understand the significance of the rituals other than communion.
Well,
especially since like before Jesus died on the cross, he regularly spoke against the Pharisees. Which, I mean, the Pharisees were the ones keeping up with the rules of the church and like the legalistic rules of the church and decorum and like society. So like, and that made a lot of Pharisees mad.
Right. But
so
we don't want to oversimplify what he was criticizing, because there were also some sort of corrupt politicization of their religious authority, either for personal gain, or to gain the political support of the Romans or the Herod's regime. But he also said that he did not come to abolish the law, but to fulfill, and to do what they say, not what they do. And so he really wasn't, destroying the religious order of the time. He was fulfilling it by his own sacrifice. And so that's why,
So Acts chapter. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So Acts chapter 2. By the way, Danny, I'm sorry.
No,
so Acts chapter 2.
Yeah.
Which is like where Pentecost and all that, like, which is like my bread and butter.
Sure.
So like the experience of the Holy Spirit taking part in people who are gathered together more than 3, that died once the last apostle died, according to the Catholics.
No, not necessarily. I mean, that's the prerogative of the Holy Spirit, right? I mean, as far as when those sorts of things occur.
Right. But like, according to me, the Holy Spirit is in me. It's not in a pope. It's not in a bishop. It's not.
Hold on. Something you said was really funny. You said, according to me. It's sort of a funny thing to say.
I'm a Protestant. I'm a Protestant. So I know.
I just wanted to point out.
I have a one-on-one communication with my Lord and Savior. I don't have a middleman. So like when I say like my personal convictions, like that's what I'm trying to say. I guess I should.
No, yeah, I get that.
I should have said my personal convictions. Like,
yeah. It sort of seemed like a Freudian slip to me.
No, it's fine. I should have been more clear to what I'm trying to say.
Campaign slogan, according to me.
Yeah.
This is the truth.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah. So
I appreciate that. Definitely I think everyone is called to have like a personal relationship with God, and that God speaks to people in unique ways. Can
you worship God in unique ways?
What's that?
Can you worship God in unique ways in a church setting?
Well, here's the thing: is that He wants us to be one, right, as a church. And we're the new Israel, right? We're a common nation, and just with the Israelites, like He called them to worship God in a common way, in a public way. And that's the other thing is that the uniformity of the worship actually speaks to, the fact that God He should be respected universally, publicly, right? That the kingship of Christ is a public kingship. It's not just something that should live only in our hearts. It should be something that is public. Now, like, that's hard to achieve in a multi-confessional state, but that's the ideal, right? I mean, that's heaven. If every tongue is confessing Christ, right? And doing so publicly, but together as a community. And of course, we're supposed to be a body, and a body should be working in coordination with its other parts. So there are certainly, and there. So to your point, there are certainly, to go with the body analogy, there are certainly unique ways that we all worship God and offer our gifts. But at the same time, it is also necessary that there be unity, and that's something that Christ desired. It was His final prayer, that they may be one. And so we really have to think about what that means. To be one, we have to be of one mind, about what we believe about God, and that we all really believe in Him the way that He truly is. And so the question is, did He leave a way for us to have a common interpretation of His word and who He is, an understanding of who He is? And we as Catholics believe that He did leave behind an authority to do that.
Okay. So are Protestants are Protestants like doomed to because we're not Catholics and we don't worship how Catholics do, or take the sacrament as many times as Catholics do? Are we just like damned to hell?
I mean, not necessarily. I mean,
you can say what you think.
Absolutely, no. I mean, you can look at the catechism.
Catholics tell me that.
Yeah, no, you can go to and look in the catechism of the Catholic Church, and it will tell you that like not everyone who is, visibly outside of the church is damned, because first of all, like as the majority of Protestants today have grown up not knowing that not knowing that this is like the church that Christ established, and so it's our belief then that they might have what we call invincible ignorance, that the ignorance of the church that they're not culpable for, they're not guilty of like knowing the truth and then actively rejecting it.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. But like, I can say the same thing about Catholics, though. It's the same thing on our side, on the Protestant side.
Of course you could, yeah.
It's like, and you said that like Jesus established a church. I mean, I don't think Jesus established a Catholic church. It seems like he more or less established the upper room in Acts chapter 2 more than anything. Well, like, he gave specific directions about a gathering in the upper room, and then something is going to happen. And then from that moment on, you are to go out and like preach the word and do everything that he did. Plus, he said,
I don't think we differ there. I mean, this church is really, it's just people, right? That's the meaning of the church. I think the Greek word that they use is ecclesia, which is sort of like just the gathering of the people. And so, I think we have the same understanding there. I think it's with the institutions of the church that I think people get bogged down with that, maybe, that like, oh, well, Christ didn't establish a college of cardinals and things like that. But but it's interesting to note that those things, they're not an absolutely necessary part of the Catholic Church, but they're practical like structures that have been erected over the centuries. So like the word, I think you say that he didn't establish a Catholic Church. Well, Catholic really just means universal. Like it's just a word that that has been added on at some point to express that the church believes the same thing around the world. And I think it was like one of the writings of the early church fathers was the first to use that term. Like, for example, like there's a saint, one of the early church fathers, I think he wrote like in the 200s or 100s, named Saint Irenaeus of Lyon. He was a student of Polycarp, who was a student of Saint John the Evangelist. But he writes about like the authority of the bishop, of the local bishop, and how all of the bishops throughout the world hold like the same faith, that they teach the same things. And he also sort of writes about the primacy of the Bishop of Rome as being sort of like the first among equals, or like having like sort of the authority to settle disputes or arbitrate those sorts of maybe disagreements. So that's like the universality of the church is really what Catholic means. But it's also interesting to note too that think about like the time of the incarnation, like in the historical context, and it sort of reflects the brilliance of God and His providence, that He brought His Son down to earth in a time of relative peace. During the Pax Romana of the Emperor Augustus, and at a time that I think that the Roman Empire was almost at its maximum, size, and upon his death, the structures of the Roman Empire, the sort of natural goods of the Roman Empire, facilitated the spread of the Gospels. the fact that there were Roman roads, there was relative peace. There's ways of traveling across the Mediterranean without worrying about pirates.
Yeah, but the Romans
common languages of Greek and Latin being spoken throughout that world really facilitated the spread of the Gospels. And so God used those natural means to facilitate the spread of the Gospels. And so likewise, with the conversion of the Roman Empire later on, that God used the structures of the Roman Empire, the legal structures and the governing structures, to sort of bring order to this wide, geographically widespread church.
Yeah, but the Romans killed the first church.
Right. I'm saying, yeah, of course.
Not hundreds of them, but thousands of them. The first church was destroyed before the Roman Catholic Church ever became a thing.
Well, no,
the original Christians, the original followers of Christ were just, obliterated by Roman soldiers, and they were crucified, and they were strung up on crosses down roads.
Sure, yeah.
You can't sugarcoat that the Romans killed the first church, which was, by the way, the closest church to Jesus, because they were the first ones, and then say that the Romans took on everything that Jesus did and said. That's not true.
No, I'm not saying that.
Not even close to true. How would they know? They killed them all.
Yeah, no, what I'm saying is that the sort of the efficient, natural structures of the Roman Empire were actually facilitating the spread of the gospel. Not intentionally. But it's by God's providence that the early evangelists were able to use those things. If they had come at a different time in history, or if Jesus had come at a different time in history, it would have been a lot more difficult for his disciples to spread. Of course, God can find a way, but he chooses to use those natural means.
As someone who enjoys conspiracies, and Danny knows conspiracies, it is so easy for Protestants. I'm just going to open the book to how Protestants feel.
Yeah,
it is really, really simple to feel like the Catholics were a gatekeeper to what real Christianity should have been, because we believe in a total autonomy, one-on-one relationship with Jesus Christ, where your preacher, your pastor is the head of your church, but he's not the head of your life, not the head of your culture, not the head of your country's culture. It's just he's your spiritual guide while you try to listen to God every day of your life. Now, a lot of Protestants believe that the Catholic Church was basically created and took advantage of the Christians, while also all the Christians were killed. The first generation Christians were killed, pretty much. A lot of them were killed by Romans. And then when they found it convenient, they co-opted Christianity and used it for a power structure for over 1,000 years. And then they also gatekeeped what the Bible said by only doing Latin services. And then they started stringing up and burning people at the stake because they wanted to be Protestant and they didn't want a person telling them how to worship their God. So I understand the history you're telling,
sure.
But for Protestants, we connect the dots. We're okay, Romans killed the first Christians. Okay. And then they co-opted it. And then they were gatekeepers to the knowledge of the Bible for over 1,000 years and stole from the peasants. They stole from the peasants. They stole their labor. They stole their gold. They stored all their wealth and made them stay poor and stay in poverty, basically. So they could keep this
there's a lot to unpack in what you're saying. Let's maybe let's stick to the first 400 years of Christianity, and we can address medieval things later. So. Not all of the Christians were killed.
Not all of them, no, but a very large amount of the first Christians were killed.
There were several persecutions under different emperors during the course of the Roman Empire. But some of those were more or less limited to certain geographical areas. And, the extent of the persecution it's hard to say, like how.
All the apostles were killed, though.
I'm sorry?
Weren't all the disciples, the apostles were killed?
Sure, but I mean,
For one, right?
Yeah. I think
Except
John,
for one.
Yeah,
it was
right.
John.
Yeah.
Yeah, not John the Baptist. Wait, no.
John the Evangelist.
John the yeah, sorry.
But I mean, not before they had already passed on their teaching and were able to, like, convey to scribes, like in the form of Luke and Mark, to write down the gospel. So, and then establish what we would consider bishops to, like, continue on their authority as leaders of regional churches. And I mean, that's pretty well documented in the writings of church fathers like Saint Irenaeus that I was mentioning, Saint Ignatius of Antioch. There's volumes and volumes of early church fathers that you can read, their testimony. I think Saint Justin Martyr, like, wrote, I forget what emperor he was writing to, but he wrote, like, to one of the emperors, sort of defending, Christian practices and explaining, like, we're not cannibals, even though we say we eat the body and blood of Jesus. Like, we're not actually cannibals.
Mm-hmm.
So we know that they had that belief in Holy Communion the way that the Catholics do and Orthodox do today. And we know that they did have bishops, because we have these very early Christian writers like Saint Irenaeus who are writing about the authority of bishops. And that's at a time well before Christianity was legalized, well before the reign of Constantine. And really, so, like, you hear a lot about how the legalization of Christianity under Constantine sort of, like, co-opted Christianity, but really, like, they just codified what they had already been teaching. There's perfect continuity between the writings of the pre-Nicene church fathers and the post-Nicene church fathers. There's no discrepancy in what they're in the beliefs that they're professing. So it does not appear that the faith was compromised due to that. And in fact, that was the first ecumenical council, the Council of Nicaea, meaning, like, the first universal council where all of the bishops of the world were called to cooperate in the council. There had been regional councils prior to that, including, I think a council before Nicaea sort of codified the books of the Bible, of the New Testament, because there were, other books that were floating around at the time, and there was an unclear determination of, like, which ones are truly inspired, Word of God, infallible, and which ones might be apocryphal. There's other books that were considered part of the Testament, like the Shepherd of Hermas, for example, which is, like, an edifying read. It's just not considered the Word of God. It's not considered, like, the inspired Word of God. So, like, that's another example of where, like, the authority of the church is sort of, like, an essential element to help discern, like, which are the sort of authoritative texts and inspired by God.
No, that makes sense. And by the way, I wasn't trying to go on a rant. It's just
trust me, I've heard it all before.
it's just I'm a libertarian at heart, and the whole idea of, like, a church setup with just the way Mass is done, it sounds and looks and feels nothing like how I'd want to worship my Lord and Savior. Like, it doesn't, like, I felt His presence. Like, I've wept, I've cried, I've I've worshipped like with my Lord and Savior, And like, I don't see that. I've never seen that in a mass. Now, the question then means either what I'm feeling is fake, and it's kind of like how the monks live their lives,
Yeah.
or either it's that, or like there is just nothing, and it's just like following these rituals.
Yeah.
And at some point that means something to God.
Yeah. Well,
I would prefer,
yeah.
I would prefer it to be that like what I'm feeling is real.
Sure.
Because I felt it since I was a child, you know, when I asked Jesus into my heart. So like, I just don't, I'm a free-spirited person. So like, I can't like see my relationship with Christ being as a bullet point, like repeated ritual.
Yeah.
In church.
Well, I will tell you from personal experience that I've shed many tears at Mass. I've shed many tears in a silent, dark chapel, by myself. But that isn't the measure of authentic spirituality. That's certainly it for you and I, for ourselves, like it's meaningful. Certainly it's meaningful, because faith is something, it's a type of knowledge that defies reason, right? It doesn't mean it's unreasonable, but it defies reason. And sometimes we have to experience God in a way that can't be articulated. And that's, how we know that God is real. But I just wanted to throw that out there, that, the ritual itself has not come between me and God. In fact, it's facilitated the connection with God. And the thing is, like, yes, there is a lot of repetition, but the truths about the divine truths they're things we've all heard before. Like, I'm sure you've had the experience where you read a gospel passage, you've read it before, you think you've known it your whole life or whatever, and then you read it again and something clicks for you. It's something new. Well, that's sort of how, I'd look at Mass, is that, even though it's the same essentials, like every Sunday, it's the living God who's working through it. So even if the externals are the same all the time, the essence of it, if you are, really prayerful about it, it will always be changing. God is always new. And, that's, I think, part of authentic, spirituality and connection with God.
Yeah. So our charismatic church services, exciting church services, are those then the emotion, the feeling, the spirit that you may feel, is that more or less drummed up from melodies? That is that
it's a $1 million question. I'm not one to sort of, make a judgment about like your.
No, I want you to. Because what I'm trying to. So like, I don't get offended easily.
Yeah.
So like, it's more applicable for you to tell me exactly what you feel, what you think about Protestant, especially like modern day Protestant churches.
Yeah.
That like emphasize on energy and spirituality and praying and speaking. Like, I'm Pentecostal, so speaking in tongues, which not all Protestants believe in anymore. A lot of Protestant churches think that ended with the last apostle, yada yada. Anyways, so like,
Catholics who believe in that. But anyway, go ahead. Yeah.
There are Catholics
there are Catholic, like, sort of charismatic services. I've never been to one, but there's similar things.
Clearly, clearly. but so like, what is your like rip the Band-Aid off like opinion of Protestant churches in general?
Yeah, well, I mean, so for those types of services in particular, well, I mean, I guess a lot what I know or what I see of Protestant spirituality in modern day America seems to be very like sort of emotionally driven. And you know, there's you go to a mega church, it's almost like a concert, you know, and they're playing songs that like pull on your heartstrings, and
very repetitive too.
Yeah, so to me that's a little bit manipulative.
I agree with you.
Because I mean that is sort of like the low-hanging fruit, right? Like in our humanity is like the emotional heartstrings, especially, you know, someone who's there because they have some wounds, you know, and they're looking for God's love and acceptance, and so you're really sort of drawing them in with that, which, you know, it's not wrong to draw them in, but it seems a little manipulative to me.
No, I'm on the same page with you.
Yeah,
especially with modern church services in the Protestant church. I grew up strictly hymns.
Okay.
I grew up with strictly hymn Pentecostal church services. So we didn't sing them like the Baptists. We like turned the knob up a little faster. So the Baptists were like very like formal and they sing it at a slow pace. Pentecostals like ratchet it up a little bit and our hands go a little higher. But anyways, so like, what's your opinion of like strictly like hymns with a piano, organ, and maybe some crazy tambourine ladies?
I mean, so all that is sort of like like the sort of the externals, right? Of worship. Like they're not like really the essentials. I mean, yeah, I love hymns. Like I love traditional hymns.
Well, you can't. No, wait. You can't like hymns.
No, we have hymns. I mean, yes, we have Gregorian chant and things like that, but also like there are places within a mass where you can sing hymns, or like
I've heard Protestant hymns in mass. Sure.
Wait. Isn't there a lot of hymns were written during the persecution of the Protestants?
No, I mean there's like modern hymns too.
Right. But like, I'm strictly talking about the oldest hymns of the oldest hymns. Weren't some of them written during like persecution from the church, like the Church of Britain?
Well, I mean, so like hymns have been written for hundreds of years.
Yeah. What does it matter?
Centuries.
What is it? What?
Why does it matter when the hymn was written?
Oh well. Have you? I don't know if you've done a deep dive into it, but like on hymn books, it'll say like the writer, the person who wrote it, and then the time, and then also you can go into the back of the book and like read like you can find like the excerpt of like where the person lived, whether or not the person was like whether he wrote it in a jail or wrote it like when he was like imprisoned or on trial. Like there's several hymns that were like written by people who are being persecuted from the English church that like I sang all the time in my church back home in Missouri. It's actually like really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, so like church hymnody like is very different in the Catholic world. I mean, it just depends on where you are. You know, I happen to go to a church that is what they call Anglican use. So it's a Catholic church where it was basically catered for former Episcopalians and Anglicans who converted to Catholicism to keep some of like their ritual intact while becoming Catholic. And so we have a lot of like these English hymns and stuff from the tradition of the Anglican church. They're quite beautiful and quite, you know, in accord with our Catholic faith.
They're some of my favorites.
Yeah.
Some of my favorites, yeah.
Yeah. And so and that's our criteria as far as whether we can sing in the mass. Is like as long as the words are like, not heretical, and they're in accord with what we believe, then that's fine. It doesn't matter if it was written by a Protestant.
Actually, see, I thought it would matter if it was written by a Protestant.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't.
Really? That's cool. That's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, and hymns, the way that they're used, can be what we would sort of consider like extra liturgical. They're not actually like part of the liturgy. Like for example, an entrance hymn or exit hymn, like are sort of bookending the liturgy. The more traditional forms of the Catholic Mass, like the Latin Mass, during the Mass, like if it's a sung Mass, then you would only be able to sing Latin, like the prescribed chants for that day. There are certain chants that go with the particular readings of that day, but they're always like biblical. They're all drawn from the Psalms for the most part.
I've got a question for you, Rob. What do you think about? Have you heard like when you've been in Mass and they've sung like "America the Beautiful"?
Yes.
In Latin?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, some of us have a problem with that. It's like now we're worshiping the flag.
Yeah, I have a problem with that.
Yeah, so we don't always get it right, as a church.
Well, Danny, I won't even say the Pledge of Allegiance for the same reason.
Yeah, right, and I support that. And
but yeah, that's more of like a incident of like a regional church or like that particular parish. It's not something that's universal, right?
Right.
All right. What's the smoke, bro? What's the smoke?
Incense?
Yeah. What is it?
Usually it's like frankincense or myrrh, or some combination of.
What's it for?
Well, it sort of denotes the things that are sacred. It sort of so there are 2 times when the incensing occurs actually 3 times. At the beginning of the Mass, the priest incenses the altar because that's where the sacrifice is going to be offered. And then second time incensing takes place is at the Gospel. The book of the Gospels is incensed. So the things that are being offered to God are incensed.
Okay.
And then the third time is at what we call the offertory, right before the consecration of the bread and wine takes place. The altar is incensed again. The bread and wine are incensed. And then the people are incensed because we are also offering ourselves as sacrifices to God.
Okay.
And that's sort of where the priesthood of all believers sort of comes into play, that we participate in the priesthood by offering ourselves in union with the priesthood of Jesus as he offers himself to the Father on our behalf.
Okay. What's the water?
So just want to do a time check here because I'm sure Josh could ask a million more questions about this.
Well, no, I so literally the only information I have about Roman Catholics are from my grandfather, who was hardcore, and my dad.
Okay.
So you are definitely more knowledgeable than my father. And my grandpa died when I was 12, so I only learned so much.
Yeah. Well, the sad thing I find is that a lot of people who, grew up with the Catholic Church and reject it, they tend to think they know more about it than they actually do. Like that they learned more than they actually learned.
He was an altar boy, though.
That doesn't mean much. Yeah. I mean, it really is like a mature seeking that has to take place, I think, to really make it your own. It can't just be something that like your mom dragged you to when you were a kid, for you to understand what the church is about and what Catholicism is about. But unfortunately, I think that's where a lot of people, that's the limit of their experience, and they think based on that they know it all.
Okay.
Yeah.
You can answer the question about the water if you want. I was just wanted to make sure.
What is the question?
What's the water like?
So like the water, like when you walk in, like
yeah,
the holy water.
The dip, that.
So honestly, that comes from Jewish prayer ritual, so they would ritually cleanse, before prayer. So those little holy water fonts in the early Roman basilicas, when they would go to, worship in secret, at the home of like a rich Roman or something like that, there would be these different parts of their home leading into like the area where they would have the mass, and so there would be like a room for like the ritual cleansing, but for us it's not necessarily like to the degree it was for the Jews. It is simply a reminder of your baptismal water.
Okay.
But also we do believe that that it will forgive, like, what we call venial sins, like lesser sins. Like it gives you absolution for that as well.
Okay. So
Yeah.
there's lesser, so some sins are worse than others.
Yeah, I mean, so we in the Catholic Church we make this distinction, and interestingly, in some of the Eastern churches they don't. But like in the Roman Catholic world, there is the distinction that there are sins called mortal sins, which are serious sins. Like it has to be something like a very serious nature, like typically something that like violates the Ten Commandments, for example, and is done with malice, that severs you. It's so bad that it severs your relationship with God. In short, that's essentially what it means.
Okay.
Like it's a rejection of God's friendship. And so in a situation like that, then you have to seek out ritual reconciliation with God, which is where confession comes in.
Yeah, we call that backsliding. And
Okay.
that's what we call that. Well, Midwest people, like I'm from Missouri, so like if you were like on the straight and narrow, which is following Christ, and then you go through a period where like you knowingly are sinning,
Mm-hmm.
and you just knowingly you're doing wrong.
Yeah.
That's called backsliding.
So I have a question for you then.
Finally, good.
Yeah. Do you believe in like sort of once saved, always saved, or can one lose their salvation? Because I hear this all the time. Like, for example, like, I don't know, like with recent stuff that Kanye West has been doing, like some people online have been like, some evangelical Protestants are saying like, well, he was never really a believer. This sort of mentality that like if someone goes off the deep end and goes back to a sinful lifestyle, they just say, well, they never really believed truly in the first place. They don't believe that you can actually lose your salvation.
Mm-hmm. All right, so this is like an ongoing like thing in my own head. I'm not an expert. So like my whole childhood, I was raised that you can definitely sin away your day of grace. Like you can sin away it, especially if you are knowingly, which obviously you're knowingly sinning. You're like, you were saved, you were following Christ, you were doing everything right, and then you like just drop the ball on purpose and you just keep going. At that point, like God doesn't have to forgive you, especially if you like don't ask for forgiveness at all. And then there's also like the instance where say you have a bad habit, say you're working on it, and
Mm-hmm.
you're still trying to straight and narrow, but you just keep falling over the same thing over and over again. I believe it's 7 times 70 is like the thing where people, like he'll forgive you that many times. That's not what it means. It means that like, he'll always forgive you.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. So like I don't know. So like my church, salvation was a fear tactic in my church growing up. Like it was just like, you don't want to sin because you could get hit by a car, and if you have sin in your heart, you're going to hell.
Oh wow.
And so it was like a really like terrifying thing as a little boy, like just being like, oh my gosh, I hope I have everything under the blood. I hope I have everything under the blood. He won't let you in if you have any sin in your life. Terrifying as a little boy. So like that's always like been like a hang up for me.
Yeah.
like God is so merciful, but then my whole childhood up until I was like 18, it's just like you could live this perfect life, and then someone cuts you off and you give them the bird,
Yeah.
and then you get hit by a car and you're dead and you're going to hell.
Yeah.
So it's always been a hang up for me, and I don't even have the answer to that question. I hope that like the way I was taught is wrong, and that God knows my heart and knows that like I'm trying, and that if I mess up, like His grace will cover me. That's what I hope now, because I can't live in that in that fear anymore.
Yeah.
Like it wrecked me. Like my first 18 years of my life, I was just like, how is anyone going to heaven? You know? Yeah. And actually we had that podcast with Lee Carter.
Yeah. That'd be a fun conversation.
Yeah, who I feel like really, really helped me.
Absolutely. And he wants to talk with us again.
Yeah. He helped me tip the scale to realize that like it's not that you're once saved, you're always saved. It's just that like just because you're saved, it doesn't mean you can't sin away your grace, but it does mean that like you better live that life to your fullest, the best you can. And if you throw it away, that's on you, and you have to plead for your soul again. So that's a super long answer, but that's where I'm at.
Yeah. Okay. No, I mean it's nuanced, but I mean it's a complicated topic. It deserves the nuance. So.
Well, like I find it hard to believe that like I could live this great life and then screw up once, die, and end up in hell. Like I hope to God that's not the case, because I'm mortal, just like you and Danny are.
Yeah. So. Yeah, I mean, the way I always sort of think about it is that, like, God's providence will decide, you know, what state you're in when you die, like, and whether it is really a just reflection of, you know, your life, and you know, you're being judged accordingly, you know.
It'd be really nice if purgatory was real.
Well, we could say that for another conversation.
Well, no. I don't need. I'm not trying to bring it out. I'm just saying, like in general, if like I don't think it's real, but if it is, cool. Like I get like another swing at it, you know.
Yeah.
I'll take it.
I just want to add. I mean, the way I heard it described once is that God could save whoever He wants, and He's not bound by any rules, including His own rules that He's passed on to the church. So, if you look at it that way.
Do you mean Mao can be in heaven right now?
Sure.
What?
If it's up to God.
I mean, if at the moment of his death he had like some sincere repentance, like, you know.
That's messed up. Could you imagine we end up in heaven and like Mao and Pol Pot and Hitler are there?
You know, I mean, I'm sure we're going to be surprised by both who's there and who's not.
Michael Jackson.
Did you say Michael Jackson?
Yeah, I said Michael Jackson. Yeah.
Why Michael Jackson? Why are you picking on him?
Probably because he's a pedo.
I don't know if I believe that.
I think that was all.
As the Catholic, come on.
I don't think it was. But we can get into that.
So? You don't think so?
There's much more Candace Owens.
Yeah. She
does a lot of.
I think that's where I heard about it.
A deep dive on Michael Jackson.
Wait, Candace died into Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
He was attacked all the time. Like he made enemies with the music industry and some other things. Yeah, which is part of how he died. But anyway, that's a rabbit hole. Like we might be out of time.
and I'm sorry for going hardcore on the Catholic stuff. I didn't know.
No, we expected that.
It's all good. That's what I'm here for.
Hey, I've talked to Danny about it before, and I think I overwhelmed him a few times.
I was like, I know a guy. I'm going to bring my best man here to talk about Catholicism here.
Before you cut it,
do
you have any questions? Other questions about Protestants, or are we like so simpleton that you've already got it all figured out?
Well, no. I mean, the thing is, like, Protestantism is very diverse. I don't know the particularities of
The original DEI.
your particular like right. Yeah, I mean, so I have Protestant in-laws, so like I encounter this sometimes with them, and funny story is like my very first encounter with my future mother-in-law was like basically just like an 2-hour like debate about once saved always saved.
Okay, does she believe in once saved always saved?
Yeah, she does.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like, again, I don't really know what I am either. I don't think I'm once saved always saved, but I also think there's like there's something. I don't know what it is. There's some kind of a line that like I don't know what it is. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
wait. In Catholicism, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
If you're baptized,
yeah.
you're good.
Well, but we I explained that we have this like belief that you could sever your relationship with God.
You could, but it has to be a mortal sin and not
a mortal sin. Yeah, something that severs your friendship with God.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. But yeah, in that situation, yes, like that you would be damned. But it's you can be reconciled, and not necessarily just through sacramental, confession. I mean, the church does teach that there's something called perfect contrition, that you're truly sorry, like not because of your fear of hell, but truly because of the damage you have done to God's majesty through your sin.
Can you pay for it?
What?
Can you pay for it?
No, you cannot.
Man.
But that is sort of like an extraordinary thing, and you don't know really. Like none of us can really determine if we have like perfect contrition. It's not something you would rely on. Like we would say, go to a priest, do sacramental confession in that situation.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Good questions though.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll wrap up here because it's getting
late. Yeah, it's getting late for you guys. Yeah, especially.
Yeah. Hey, thanks, Rob, for joining us. This is a lot of fun.
It's been fun.
Yeah,
it was a pleasure meeting you.
Yeah, Josh, good to talk to you.
It was good talking to you.
Talk again. Hopefully, I can meet you in person someday.
Yeah.
On the mats.
Oh, sure. Either way.
Oh yeah. Pay-per-view. It's going to be the main event.
Pay-per-view.
All right.
It'll be webcam view. That's the only view it will be.
Right.
Well, I hope our listeners enjoyed this as much as we did. All right. Take care, Lancaster. We'll see you soon. Bye.
All right. Have a good night.
You too. Bye.